want my viewers, who are worthy people, who are not cowards and spies and traitors against myself or anyone else. I don't want any backstabbing, criminal, scumbag, hypocrites to go to hell. No, 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 no. Not anyone who's not that. I mean to specify. If you are that, then yes, this message at the beginning is for you to go to hell. And I sincerely hope you become very efficient with that and with God's speed. Now, for the rest of the viewers, who may be greater than or equal to 0 people, who I don't want to go to hell, even if they are in the general public, it is to you whom the rest of this is dedicated. Lovers of truth, who are not despicable hypocrites and monsters. Well, so the question has arisen about truth and what is its value. Surely you'd want to know the truth about this. What is the truth and the value of the truth? If you were most people on earth, because most people on earth think they know a certain truth, which is that if you don't submit to a certain authority, you're going to go to hell. That's literally what most people on this planet believe. It's amazing. I happen to agree that it is the truth that most people on this earth are going to hell, and therefore it doesn't matter what they believe. That's not a very popular position. Most people don't like that idea. They don't like the idea they live in a dystopian universe where most of the beings in it are evil. They obviously haven't spent any time looking into realities of places like that compared to where they live now. Places that would make where they live now seem to them like heaven. Ergo, by contrast, places which to them, in contrast to their heaven, would seem like hell. Well, that's what the world seems like to me because of seeing it with open eyes, what it is. And that information is traumatic. Make no mistake about it, that information is traumatic. But you know, denial is traumatic. You're not really alive if you're in denial about what life is. I don't really know what to call you if that's the case. You're like an automaton or someone being programmed into oblivion before oblivion's even gotten here yet. Oblivion's not even here yet. And to the demons that I have sent to hell, they are already in oblivion. They don't exist as people yet. All that, and in fact, everything that came before their choices to become part of an evil regime of covert operations involving any subterfuge and any illegal use of force of any kind, any invasive or non-invasive surveillance of any kind, without proper pretexts of there being an actual crime committed and of those resources being actually legally used for the purpose of prosecuting that crime. You can't use any misdemeanors as a pretext for sending forces against someone that you wouldn't even bother to send against Al-Qaeda's or other types of groups since they've been living in the country. We've been apparently pulling off jobs that any FBI detective years before had seen coming, if they were honest upon seeing the evidence. Because these whistleblowers aren't necessarily Sherlock Holmes. But they saw what they saw and they reported it up the chain and they got booted out. They got worse than booted out. Now why? Why the hell would that happen? So obviously the truth is that these groups are doing these things. And they're even letting things happen which they should not be letting happen at an institutional level, systematically in the intelligence agencies. When that goes on, you cannot trust those agencies. Not logically. And I'm anything if not logical. And there are a lot of things I'm not, therefore, by contradiction, I am definitely illogical. I know this is going on. I can prove it. I don't give a shit what anyone thinks because I can go from evidence to facts to theses and their confirmation or disconfirmation. I can do that. Sorry if you can't, but you know, that's why you hire lawyers and they don't hire you. If it was a choice between you and a lawyer, you would not stand a chance defending yourself. He would. You'd hire him, but he wouldn't hire you. He'd represent himself. I'm saying that there is a certain kind of expertise that comes with practice and utilizing a faculty even though other people tell you to stop. Did you know it's a sin in some religions to think independently? Literally. This is a sin. Murder. Adultery. Not even knowing what adultery means. It means spiritual adultery. And, of course, if you're already in marriage with someone who is not good but evil and you're good, in other words, you're with an honest, you're sleeping with the enemy. That is adultery. You're not with your proper mate if you're a good person and you're cohabiting with an evil person. That's stupid. That's spiritual suicide. Better to be alone. That's why Paul said better to be alone. That's what bothered him about the flesh, not the flesh itself per se, but that too. But murder, adultery, yeah, murder. Yeah. Take it from them, they know. Soul murderers. And then finally, thinking independently, or as they put it, independent thinking. You saw it in They Live, no independent thought. I hadn't seen They Live growing up in a family which espoused this religious nonsense, and by the time I had seen it, I already lived through what George Nada lives through in the movie. I'd already done all that. I already blew up the goddamn antenna. I'm paying for it my whole life. Well, so what? Gladly. And you know, to the glory of the right. To the right. To the right. Damn right. Damn right I did. I cursed them all in their false authority. I cursed them in their false authority, and they know damn well who they are. So what do I have? What do I have to lose in a bargain where the truth is at stake, except the truth itself? Nothing. The truth is all I have to lose. And what is the truth? Well, the truth is, if you live in a certain kind of world, you need to know the truth about it, or you're running afoul of some very powerful forces without even justifying it to yourself first. You're just committing blind suicide. You got to know what world you live in. Truth is a correspondence relation between your sense of knowing, your inner sense of gnosis, your self as such, the spiritual essence of you, and the world in which you are embedded. That explains to you, this truth explains to you the correspondences you see in the world with some part of you. And if that part of you includes a conscience that's fully awake and knows good from evil, then you should be able to judge the two when you see them in the world. And that's very important to do in extreme cases, which are sometimes only discoverable by an absolute devotion to knowing what the hell it is this kind of world is that you live in. And as a philosopher, yes, I took that to be what I was doing, and I enjoyed the hell out of it immensely. It was heaven for me all through my life since I was a 5-year-old boy. You know, doing that. And no one cared. No one gave a damn except an occasional teacher. But they secretly hate that. Oh, they pretend to praise it. Oh, you must have a huge IQ. Oh, you know, oh, we can't wait to patronize you some more, fruitlessly. Why would someone with a 170 IQ, if that's what it was, who cares, want to talk to them? These are the people that are part of the system that can't wait to find ways or look the other way concerning ways in which people are literally trying to poison your brain and mind with lies and with actual chemicals being dumped in your water, air, and food. And through weapons, directed energy weapons being constantly directed at us. They want control, and that's it. And if something won't fit into their control, they're not satisfied. They live. They go to hell. That's where they go. They're already in hell. They're in oblivion. They haven't even become persons. Who does that? Who goes from womb to that? That isn't better off going from womb to wastebasket. Who? I dare anyone to tell me. Come on, class, speak up. Is it just you? And which one of you would ever to my face say it's the world is better off with you in it than without you in it? I dare you to do it. This world is better off without them in it. I say to my real viewers, not these walking corpses. I say to you, without those demons in this world who serve the archons gladly, much better world, much better. Even if it's still evil, man, it's paradise by comparison to this shit. They feed you horse shit in the news, and you're supposed to sit there all feeling good about it. They lie to your face, and you're supposed to go, thank you, sir, thank you, sir. So this world, of all worlds, you would want to be certain about the truth of it, because the truth itself is at risk in that world. It's managed by liars. It's a fight for the life of your soul to learn the truth, possibly at the risk of your life. So now, that's not what it looked like at first. I mean, to a 5-year-old, that's not something that they're literally, oh, they don't even know. I didn't even know what I was doing. I was just thinking about stuff that had to do with theology, metaphysics, and stuff like that. Oh my God, there's so many kids that do that. There's so many kids that do that, and they get shut up and mocked. I'm surprised I got away that I did most of it with myself, because I knew there's no use talking to them about it. And then, you know, it didn't go nearly as far as it would have if I had lived in a family that fostered truth. But they scarcely exist. It's perhaps better that I just went sort of dormant with it or hidden with it. I was living a double life that the world couldn't address anyway. So, but finally it came to my attention that truth could be formalized logically and mathematically. It finally came to my attention because I finally just had time and access to that information. And once I could formalize, I was doing this, you know, early on in high school. I was investigating it, and outside of the context of what was taught, because studying geometry, you find out about logic in the text. My God, that's awesome. You mean thought itself can be represented just like these geometric proofs? And then of course, I had been using logic throughout my life by that point. A lot. Actually, I was considered to be very premature in my conceptual development. So, in any event, you know, I was reading about 5 grades higher than my level with understanding, artistic representations of what I read from, say, Shakespeare or whatever. But the point is, Macbeth being my favorite. This is not my talent show. This is me, just what I'm doing, right? And I'm doing this, and I don't understand this system. I hate it. Being around all these little youngsters is driving me nuts. There's no truth being discussed at all. Finally, I get to the point where they start talking about it. Geometry. What's the truth of propositions? What's the truth of a proposition? Demonstrate it through axiomatically derived formulae that are given. Then you do your proof, and then you've done a demonstration when you reach the result that you intended. Same in algebra, same in all mathematics. Mathematics does it, logic does it formally for thought, or attempts to. It's the science of attempting that. It's much easier to do with quantity as such. We're talking about qualities as well in logic, so real logic, not just computer logic. They're dealing with only one kind of quality, namely the question of whether a variable is of some specification within a range of possible specifications, and then using formulations of whether that information carries across to reach a result or not. It's all. It's just machine theory. I mean, a machine can do what they're doing. Okay, literally. Like, you could make a machine that does what they do, so how do you know they're not machines? I mean, they're not necessarily addressing anything that real humans, real minds do in terms of qualities. Philosophers are definitely doing that. They're not necessarily doing it with very much logic, as history has demonstrated in certain cases. But they definitely are using logic for the most part, the ones that stand out. But there are a lot of fool wannabes that pollute the world, really, with their chaos, but they can be screened out in terms of their lack of precision and substantial volume right there. But then it turns out that there's a world that is corrupted enough that even up to the local priesthood, if there's a religion that has a priesthood and they have a local version that's literally the equivalent of a priest above a deacon, he'll demonstrate, as he demonstrated to me in my teenage years, that they lack honest to goodness understanding of spiritual truth. They don't understand it, and they don't want to talk about it, and they don't care. Just don't you step out of their lines. I posed that. And they showed contempt. Then I showed them contempt, and I left. And then I was devouring, any book I could get my hands on that was relevant to any of these topics. And hell or high water, all through the military. See pictures of me? There I am with a book, even out in the field. There was always something to do, but there was always learning and growing and trying to understand more, trying either to understand the world or justify it according to my knowledge. But when the knowledge reached the point and the facts reached the point where it was clear that there was some fundamental corruption going on, it had to stop. It had to stop in personal life and in public life. And just it has to stop. I'm not buying into a lie. I'm not buying into a lie, especially not a systematically engineered and reinforced a lie which is reinforced by the complacency and ignorance of everyone around me. No. You can all get on that ship and go be on the menu of the aliens on another planet together. I have nothing to do with you. And if you can't, if this message can't reach you, people of that category, then you would have ended up there anyway, probably. So, but if it can't reach those who deserve to hear it, that's how bad the world is now. That's just further proof. We can throw that in as it just gets worse. But as true as things stand, that's a conceivable, nearby possible world at least. And so on the conception that if it is the case, then it's also conceivable that being heard by people who need to hear it is a nearby possible world. It's a reasonable enough chance that I'll take the effort to do it. But it also adds weight against them on the scales of Anubis, for sure. And lightens my heart to do so, I know. And it will strengthen my right arm whenever it's tearing off the false authority of the evil one who gets in my way on my path to victory, because I'm not submitting to a false god of any kind, especially not a cowardly hidden one. So on to truth. Truth beyond truth. Truth on top of truth. Truth with truth on top. Sprinkled all over. Basically, truth is understood to be a concept in our Western languages, English, derived from Anglo-Saxon and Germanic generally. Proto-Germanic has a form which I cannot pronounce and cannot find anyone who can tell me how to pronounce it, because they're all experts who don't reveal that online, unless you know the symbols they use. It's spelled like this in Proto-Germanic. Let's put it in capital T. Probably Truva. Probably Truva. Because the J would have probably been silent and at the end or something, and would maybe suggest Truva. Yeah. So it'd be a really light J, maybe. True, true, true. Yeah, very light Y, true, or something. I don't know. Anyone's guess is as good as mine. The experts know. They're not watching this. Well, if you can find one. But anyway, what they meant by that was having good faith. So having good faith, what does that mean? That means that the faith you have in something will be rewarded. It means it's not, you're relying on something being the case, and then it is the case. And that's supposed to be good for you. At least what's in good faith is your understanding of matters. You can always take that away from it. Sherlock Holmes, let's take him as a running example. His character, this character Sherlock Holmes, he performed amazing feats of deduction and induction and just sensory and perceptual inspection, the inspector par excellence, which would reveal to him things he would not want to believe were true, not want to imagine, not want to know, and found the limits of his sanity tested in some cases. But they were, but when he came through and he discovered the truth, however he felt about it, he was vindicated as a person whose honesty matters. People who are honest about things that don't matter, that's not really impressive. People who are honest about things that really matter, even in the face of life and death, even in the face of ultimate destiny, truth as such, in meaningful terms, those people's opinion, wow, that person matters. Sherlock Holmes matters. It's proven by all the plots in which the character is placed. He's always involved in the things that most people will shy away from, look away from, not have any clue about, and be unwilling to do anything about if they did know. So against all the grain of that, he would perform feats of immense complexity in all areas of scientific investigation of what is the case. And so, I mean, he was in good faith, if anyone was, because against the grain of some rather unmotivating implications, he was involved to the core in finding the truth and doing something about it on top of it. He's in good faith. You can take, you don't have to constantly do background checks on Sherlock Holmes. He's even proven it. So, as a character. So he's in good faith. He's in good faith because when he has dealings with the world, the good and the evil in it, he's square and consistent in his understanding of the matters and his response to them. He is true, and in fact, that's understood to be a sort of property of a person in some derivations. In Indo-European languages, it's part of the idea to be true, and it's implied in other languages as well. And it's implied, but it's built into the word for sure. Or the word has that idea built into it, and it derives out. So someone is true. They have truth. It's in Old English, in, say, Sir Gawain and the Green Knight. Middle English and Old English. So the truth is sufficiently encapsulated in the idea of such correspondence, such integrity, such consistency, such reliability as is contained in the person and verified by its correspondence with experiences of and actions in the world. And this confirms the truth of a being. So in that light, it's sufficient to identify them and then pick a color. That's what it means. That's what we're talking about. That kind of coherence combined with correlation. The correlation is there. If it's not there, what's in doubt are the circumstances or What's in doubt is the question of how has the investigator been lately, because it always been there before. Whereas we know of this through someone who has this in them and demonstrates it in themselves, in their dealings with the world, in how they assess it and appraise it and deal with it. And this is most brilliantly contrasted when it's against people who are damned liars and damned cowards and damned murderers and assassins of any kind. Not just ones that do it out in public and take as many with them as they can. Those people are understandably, disdained and looked down on and pitied. But perhaps they had their motives or whatever. But we're talking about the people that do it covertly, in hiding, using the tricks of that trade. Oh, wow. It's actually more despicable than the public shooters, because you're cowards. You're doing it covertly. Or those who murder truth by suppressing its expression or reception by anybody in any venue, and you're to be condemned to hell. And in honor of this destiny for you, I would like to send you there myself. And so I want you to hear it. Yeah, that's for you. That's all. That's the song that should be playing in your head. Frankly, I don't know if how the author of it would feel, but I think liars are the most despicable beings on the planet. From what I've seen in his music, Dave Mustaine's music, yeah, he definitely despises dishonesty, and so do I, to the utmost. And truth is the enshrining of honesty as a principle, rather than just as a character trait in a human person. Not that that's demeaning to it, but it's just to distinguish it as a principle rather than a character trait. And we were talking about properties and traits and qualia and propositions, rather properties. So qualities and qualia, character traits and properties and aspects. These are all interrelated. The metaphysics of it is key to ordering a judgment in logical terms about the world. So in so doing, I will bring that information to bear. But basically, the truth is what it is about the world, and those who are making it the way it is definitely should go to hell. And no one who loves truth should really want to be in a world with them unless they can be exposed and denounced openly. So I would expect a world in which they had systematic control would probably restrict such denunciations from being seen by too many. Let's put it that way. Maybe they'll have some plausible deniability by letting it leak, but then such a trickle, and then people would go, oh, why would they let it trickle if they were trying? They have their argument, they have their lawyers, they have their rationalizations and delusions to back them all the way to hell. Won't prove much company there, though. All illusions flee in hell. I promise you that. All of them. Because it's the revelation of truth, the apocalypse, that sends everyone to their separate destinies, to heaven or hell. And you're going to hell if you're involved in any of these deceptions. You're going to hell. There's no question about it. But for the rest of the people who are greater than or equal to 0, and who are listening, actually there's at least one person who will be me later. So, to myself if no one else. That would be truth epsilon. But in the case of truth and understanding it, we understand it to be a certain kind of correspondence. There is a foundedness, a validity, a significant and sufficient similitude between what's in the mind and in the world. There's an understanding of what's going on in the world, an understanding that is in the mind about a world that is not merely in the mind of the understander. It has an independence from him. Although that is a function of all the other minds involved, on that level, below it, and above it. It's a correctness that, if constant and consistent, enables the manifestation of sincerity in anything that that person does. Their honesty becomes an outwardly impeccable expression of their inward nature. It's not ever a put-on. You can be sure that someone who is veridical in this way, they have veritas, that they are in good faith. And that's related also to the Germanic, through the Latin. Veritas, verus, vera, vera in Slavic, and in West Germanic and Dutch, wara, or vara, vara, vara. And then so it goes all the way back into Proto-Indo-European. I don't know what that would be. But in any event, it would be the root, whatever it is. And all that tells us is that there is a meaningful correlation, which we've just had a nice discussion about. So I think we all understand truth in this sense. Isn't that something you can feel? Yes, of course, you can feel when something's true. They talk about in all cultures and in all venues of each culture in which it would be important to know the truth, such as religion. They say something either rings true or doesn't. In law, the same. Are we convinced? We can ask. So in the cases of truth, we have a common understanding of a quality that we directly experience when it feels as though that's been satisfied. And I've described that sense as an intuition in the past of this form, functionally, which would be to know, X knows the truth as an experience in their consciousness of reality. Because consciousness is always a reality, and reality is our realities are minds and minds within minds. And so this would be the formal way to state this, if this were made say, truth as such, which would be put in a capital T form, truth as such. It's a quality. So we know that this equals a kind of quality. And I like to make supernal features fancier. And so, T, it's already as fancy as it should have to be, but I'm gonna call it in some discussions there's something called super truth. Something is super true, and surely this is the essence of all that as well. So it's a supernal kind of truth. So we have the quality of truth as such, and we can see that there's a kind of knowledge of truth as an experience of relation of subject and object in various forms. So that by this means we can later form further investigations into truth, both purely and in terms of further experiences in reality. We can uncover it. Like investigators who solve crimes, they go out for more features of objective features of a thing that happened, get an experience of it, relate that experience as they and others have had in the past, and try to figure out what actually happened based on all that evidence, using logic. So they get familiar with a kind of truth, the historical truth of crimes that occurred, as best as they can. Coffee break. By the way, if you haven't had coffee, all those whom I love and care about, who are few and far in between, if at all, in my audience other than myself, because I damn and curse those who would ever interfere with the process of free communication in a free society, and who knows. I think you should pause and make yourself some coffee. Every once in a while, I'll sip of that and do you some good in keeping up with this. It's involving. Because to know this abstractly is nice, but what I hope to convince you of is that the philosophical work I've done before was not in vain. I could have continued on to the master's and PhD quite safely by just learning my lesson and not butting heads anymore. But I can tell you what, I could see it then. The headbutting was going to continue on and on and on and on. My academic contribution would have been stunted by that, if it would have been measurable at all, because working in these areas in academia requires such a formal approach that it actually stifles the work. At least for me, I mean, to pay attention to the style of promoting a thesis for some people, oh, please, get out of here. Not on subjects that are so important. The entire world's significance to me is at stake. I'm too busy with gathering important evidence and analyzing it to be kissing the little felt shoes of some old corpse who doesn't give a damn about the truth anyway and lacks sincerity. Professor M. So I'm compelled, as if by observing a glorious beauty that I cannot ignore, save I risk somehow my own essence. A little bit more thoroughgoing than your description of the ontological nature of beauty, or the metaphysical nature of it, I would say, Professor M. You know you are. But anyway, there's just going to be Professor X, Y, and Z. Why bother continuing? But I can tell you what, though, if that has gotten me nowhere but into the further investigation of truth in a way that satisfies my conscience minimally, I'll be happy. And if I have nothing more to do with it past that point, and I go on with other things, I will not feel that I've done myself or philosophy a disservice. Many who have gone much further into academia have done quite the reverse and cannot make the same claim on either count. But I can tell you that in all cases, there are qualities that it is philosophy's job to investigate. So it comes up in the discussion, because the question becomes, if you live in such a world where truth is at stake to such a degree that those who profess it consistently will inevitably be treated radically different than those who do not, and that the world will be shaped on the whole by those who work as levers of control people's dishonesty against their honesty, enough to mold them into a shape that they can control economically and politically and socially, then I would be sure to be concerned about that world and the implications of any evidence I see which confirm it. And then if I got enough evidence on that theory, I would be worried that other types of evidence that it did not disconfirm would also become a problem. It doesn't disconfirm a nightmare utopia when you know that the world's already, on some level, nightmarishly, a nightmare dystopia, a utopia for nightmares. A nightmare dystopia, and really in essence a nightmare utopia, because it's a utopia for them, but it's a nightmare for everyone else. For evil people, our dystopia is their utopia in any way they can get it. They're not that picky. They don't have some kind of divine standard to adhere to. They're contrary to the divine quality of truth. They require and utilize deception in any form sufficient to put them on top temporarily. And then they want to extend the duration of that temporary dictatorship and tyranny over others as long as they can. And they'll have nothing to do with anything else. They're addicted to power on a physical level. So investigating truth in a world they control is bound by its nature to earn you their enmity. But you know what? I'd rather have God's friendship than theirs. And God is the friend of the honest who love truth, or no one's at all. And certainly not their friend. And if he is, he's not mine. So, truth is king in this world, to me, and in any world. And if it's like David on the run from some bastard son who's trying to usurp him, then may he be caught up in a tree and made sport by lesser men. And it will happen. It will happen. Fate is not in the favor of evil, no matter how well prepared, in the longest run. And that is what eschatology teaches us to understand. Not to confuse ourselves to be on the timelines assigned to us by some dude claiming to be a prophet. Some dude. You know, some dude tell you when the end is coming and then make things matter for you on his terms, on a scale, the tune of which he sets. Nah, no cults for me, thanks. The cult of truth, yeah, I love the truth. It's beautiful. Truth is glorious. Another quality. And by the way, there is some intriguing relation between these, because qualities have truth as one of their qualities. All qualities are consistently, coherently distinct and of a certain nature. They're substantive. They have, as Thomas Aquinas would have said, Thomas Aquinas would have said, they have substantive being in themselves. Subsistent being. That is what's required for truth to exist, and it's related to the term, in that any discussion of truth that goes any deeper than just using it in a common way would require people to focus in on other subjects like knowledge as such, existence, being, essence, entity, mind, properties, experience, phenomenologies, phenomena. All those would have to be considered. It's definitely persistent in all those topics to refer to a subsistent beingness in a quality of any kind. And qualities are what are studied in categorizing in metaphysics. And ontology has to have a theory about quality. So, truth has a fundamental relationship before the human understanding. And instead of representing it that way, because that could have specious interpretations, which I don't want to promote here anyway, for sure, or anywhere, especially not here. We would say that they have a fundamental kind of relation that is like congruency and like dual implication, but is different than them. It's not they are distinct, nevertheless, not just in how we take them, but as different frequencies of the same fundamental substance, at the least. There's a distinction there, and it's a truthful one. They might be different facets of the personalities of heaven. I don't know how else better to put it now. But truth, quality, and by the way, which has become synonymous with virtue in some contexts, which is a power to express a certain desired trait, power to act in a certain way. It's desirable, as in a skill. But virtue, in fact, has come later to mean, since the Greeks employed it, it's come later to mean a noble characteristic in a person, which is the basis of which is a basis of saying they have spiritual power sufficient to hold an office of authority and not diminish its dignity and find their dignity in that, and without any undue sense of inflation and without being likely to tend toward any kind of corruption. They have virtue. Those qualities all are, let's just say, isomorphic with what we say about truth and with what we say about glory, which can be understood as a beauteous qualities fundamental source. You know, there's an emanation of consciousness which is its own reward, in that righteousness or real consciousness, reality, is its own reward. That's been demonstrated throughout the history of real religion to be something that they all say. They don't just not talk about glory. It doesn't happen. What do they mean by it? Well, they don't mean gratifying some disingenuous ego, pretense of having spirituality, which it doesn't, wrapping it in vestments and letting it walk forth in front of a bunch of pigs wearing nice clothes, which won't make them either people or good people, nor religious. None of that. So in other words, I'm talking about the substance, and the essential substance is referred to as essence. And essences are relations fundamental which allow a being to be of a kind, and they relate a property to a character and a qualia to a quality. So it would be one of the vertical relations between those two. But it's a manifestation of the power of the characteristic of the character of an entity, and the quality of a subjectivity of a subject, of a person, and those two together form the basis of experiences of any kind, and therefore experience is always denotative of an essence. I'm not going to do this all diagrammatically or syllogistically. I'm just basically the previous videos make this fully explicable deductively. And the experience of that essential feature is an experience of essence, which is then formulated into a concept and used in a language for describing, in extreme cases of certain qualities, truths, and other substances and concepts and ideas generally, the need to take actions that can be judged right or wrong, to the point that people will literally decide one another's fate on the basis of these judgments. And in fact, if they have a conscience, will likely decide their own as well, and for sure their fates will be decided on the basis of these topics to eternity by the proper authorities with a capital A. So there are kinds of power that come out of this. And powers, yes, right about probably what somebody was thinking, generate sort of authority, which is fundamental, and all these are related. And I got, glory will redound to dignity. There are so many subfamilies of qualities. But truth can subdivide into an idea which is ready to hand useful, and that's called fact. And fact is what leads to veritas. Facts are what lead to the term for fact would be vada in West German and Dutch, and it would be vera in Slavic, and that means faith, which relates back again to truth as in good faith. And veritas would be that something had verity as a proposition. They would then say it was a fact. It was a factum. So it's a fact for that reason. And then there's the term verifiable facts, right? something shouldn't be treated as a fact in some context unless it's verifiable, is what that means. And why? Because facts are really, in essence, fundamentally derived from being true. Things that are true, circumstances that are true, propositions that are true. Those are real facts. The others are not. So, now, if they can be shown to be true, then all the better to show that they are. We haven't lost any ground. We're still where we were, plus knowledge. So it's worth doing. And systematically, I will show why it's worth doing in the axiological videos, which will follow later in Gnostic axiology, which will discuss more the issues of glory and the quality that emanate in the world through art and the forms of beauty and aesthetics, and in terms of as a quality, and then as another quality, justice, the quality of knowing what is right and doing it, and righteousness, the characteristic quality of such people who are that way, who are just. And but in some systems they're understood that's understood to be true because they are for its own sake and for no other motivation. They are the most righteous for sure, those who are for its own sake. And it's part of the Zoroastrian, the most fundamental Zoroastrian prayer, as a matter of fact. It's sufficient. That idea there, and why it's spiritually appropriate, that's the essence of Zoroastrianism. But in fact, there is I had a professor. I am professing this, but I don't entitle myself to such terms. But there was a professor we had who this guy could not put his coffee thermos down. He was drinking every 10 seconds. I don't know what was in that thermos. But I had one too, and I always had hot coffee in mine, so I don't know what he thought of that, but you couldn't tell because his glasses were so thick and his beard was so big. And we never did anything but seriously talk about epistemology for an hour, several times a week. So we communicated on nothing other than the results of papers and tests. So these people were reflective sometimes of some qualities of intellectual virtue, but that does not exhaust the limits of what could be brought into question about a person. Their intellect is not enough to tell us everything about them. And I'm not judging any of those that I had no firm evidence were corrupt, but I saw some who were corrupt, who abused their office for personal reasons. Absolutely deplorable. Just idiots. So basically, those can be discussed, ethics in academia, for example. All those topics can be discussed in the ethical, the axiological part when justice is considered. And that's exactly where things have to go in order to make direct use of these principles of truth, which I will be doing, making direct use of them in order to spell out actionable situations in the world which require certain kinds of ethical decisions based on the implications that are best able to be formulated given the circumstances and what we know. Continuing on with this then, so there is the knowledge of truth as an experience that is so fundamental. It is known implicitly in anyone who knows anything. They just don't know that they know it at best. Or there's no knowledge. There's either no experience in that person. They're an automaton of some kind, parroting, not even knowing what they're talking about. Of course, they have no knowledge. There's no substantial. The experience is not there. Clearly, there's no truth there for them to have an experience about. No objective features, no facts, no valid logic, no sound premises. Whatever they say, a machine could do, trained well enough. They're little monkeys, as was as Alex Jones called them, monkeys. And then there's the being, that singular being, the mind, who has this experience. They're the first witness to it. Why do they even want to listen to anybody else? The event happens in them, and they're the sole main witness. Except God knows. Who else? And so this fundamental sense needs a fundamental symbol, and it has one here. So what are the implications of this? Well, the implications were, in the past already in these videos, that there is a kind of relation of a mind with reality, wherein there's a fundamental experience of this reality, and we can have it in two forms. I'm going to use a system of symbolization that I learned from someone else, and I only do it in this particular instance because I operate on different fundamental principles than he does. His name was Charles Herman, and I credit him with the emphasis that I put in some of my terminology, because he helped mentor me along in the studies of philosophy and psychology and other subjects, and I ended up just taking off on my own. But he gave very general and good advice about what books to start off with, what classics. This is long before I went to college, and how to study, and who to learn how to study from, even, and I did this while helping him rebuild his house and everything. It was a mentor pupil kind of relationship, and met him in a cafe, good old New Orleans cafe. Is there anyone? Hey, is there anyone alive out there who remembers the good old New Orleans cafe? It's like the sunset strip of legend in the Eagle song, I believe, or the Sunset Grill rather. It's like the Sunset Grill. Anyway, so you have the subjective aspect, and the objective pole of all experiences as such, which are themselves properties of the capacity to know anything, insofar as if this is true, then it generates, I'm going to do this like a flow chart this time, so it doesn't, well, that light, sometimes the light obscures. This should enable a situation where the same mind, which I'll give it a unique, interesting color, like black. When the mind that has this experience can be said to know it, it can be said, therefore, to know it fundamentally in that way. Balls to bones, as it were, whatever. So this continues and leads to propositions about the discussion, which they fundamentally know, which is found in the form that they have knowledge of certain fundamental propositions. They have fundamental knowledge of certain propositions. Let's try with blue. We'll keep a peak there. And of course, I've used in this case truth as that symbol, and there I think I should. It's more aesthetic. Sometimes aesthetic properties manifest logical and metaphysical properties, or somehow assist them, and that should be respected. And in their learning and in their presentation. So all these relations obtain through the fact that this is true, certainly. It is true. And also, I stated this general definition earlier, which I present as it's done. So they will dry out. It's done in the form previously that knowledge of reality implies a knowledge of a certain fundamental sort of experience, and that is true in here. So we have, first of all, I will put this therefore in the same, to make it more concordant. And that is, don't get too fancy. That knowledge of that fundamental truth of reality. So we're going to have to make it that. Basically. Now this is a horrible one. Never again, as they say. Reality as such, which of course observes the blue, royal blue. And that fundamental knowledge itself implies the knowledge of this. I should put it there. Not really, actually, not right off the bat. And this has been a certain significant issue. But this can be changed. The simple knowledge of the fact of an experience, which is S relation, subject relation, object as fundamental experience. It seems possible to discuss this relation even among automata. Like a robot could discuss this, it would seem. So discussions of this proposition do not entail anyone in it having real knowledge of it. But if you have real knowledge of the proposition, in this case the reality of the proposition that is real, in a fundamental form of experience that demonstrates it directly. Basically, oh, that's a lot of subs. Reality, sub-property, sub-epsilon. But an experience of reality, of course, is always subjective and objective complex of events in a mind, such that basically, there's not necessarily an ontology of truthful knowledge, just because there is an apparent knowledge of propositions or structured knowledge. So the experience as something fundamentally real has to go through, as it were, an ontological vetting process before it will manifest. And it's manifest in the minds of the persons having the experience. So they're the first witness of the best testimony and have the best testimony about it. And anyone that has common sense about this kind of information when it comes to right and wrong are good people. But people that do not, or whose common sense is merely mechanical and instilled by some custom, tradition, habit, or something like that, they're just a mob. They're just pigs with nice clothes on in church. They're not really there for the sermon. And often they aren't, explicitly. They're there to compare clothes and smell each other's colognes. So, this is the complex of relevant propositions for our understanding in carrying on further investigation of the nature of how to make judgments which have moral and ethical implications. In other words, in order to process concepts of justice and apply them in cases. In the case of the motivations for doing so in axiology, that are not merely matters of deciding issues of fairness and equity and balance and the weaker, more formal kinds of authority, decency, and propriety. Then we're talking about matters that border more on what is strictly considered the exercise of freedom above and beyond any such matters, and therefore supposedly the creative productions of culture are included in that group. And then what is glorified is the sum of all, in a culture, is all the sum of all that which is made prominent in those circumstances. And we know about the fraud going on in our society, and we know about the scandals involved with all these people. And we know, for example, before going further, this is sort of like highlight of things to come in the other series, not this series, but in the other series. You can look at the way Hollywood treats certain icons, like thinking of everyone knows him. And here's okay. See if you can guess it. All his movies have 3-word titles. All his movies have 3-word titles, and I said all his movies, and that's not a few. 5 seconds. Steven Seagal. Steven Seagal is such an abused among some strange subculture of Hollywood. He is such an abused public figure. It's astounding. And by people whose reputations don't really add up to anything in my world. And they haven't really entertained me or done me any. I get nothing out of the culture they produce. Let me just put it that way. I'm not even going to name names. I'm just going to say I've got nothing out of the culture they produced. That it's just not. But Steven Seagal has represented the battle between good and evil in a special way, in a special niche that no one else has in the movie industry. Nobody has promoted the idea that it should be dealt with mercilessly, that it entails corruption that goes up systematically to the top, and it should still be dealt with mercilessly. And that it's even possible to do so with grace, bearing, and dignity, and with a good heart. All his characters demonstrate that. We're not talking about him as him. We're talking about him as actor and screenwriter and producer of film. And leaving the question of any of his foibles, personal and private, and even public, out of the matter, including some of his political ideas, at least he's going to vote for Donald Trump. So, no. It's a good one, though, right? At least he speaks out against gun confiscation and unconstitutional gun control, which is all heading toward confiscation. Anyone knows it. A lot of people don't know it, are the thin veil of mobbish-minded idiots in the middle. Can't know anything, it would seem. They actually know the prices of everything on the value meals at all the fast food restaurants. Considering those menus and comparing and contrasting their merits and demerits is a serious topic at their dinner table discussion. Who cares about their opinion of Steven Seagal? And they're the ones that are most likely to get a hate on for him just because it's the trendy thing to do. I said, you know what? No. First of all, those are some powerful movies. I'm not saying that I'm not saying that they're not ersatz and kitschy in their own little ways, but basically they're not bad at all. They're not bad. And where they're bad, they're so bad they're good. And he even uses that as an art form in there. But the people that get it deserve it, and they get it dished out to them right, instead of like in this phony world. And it's for the right reasons, and the good people have good hearts, and all that kind of stuff. It's got a real they live. It's got a real John Carpenter feel to it in the way he portrays people as people. I like Steven Seagal's work. I don't know about everything he does, and maybe there's a lot of what he does that I don't like, but I bet you that that's in spades for the rest of the people pointing fingers at him, and a lot of other people who don't get any spotlight put on them for being assholes. And I'm telling you, he is not, if he's an asshole, then he's not the only one in Hollywood. Get real. This is the fucking asshole of the world. Los Angeles. Hollywood is the epicenter of that foul orifice. So, it doesn't even clean itself. Incredible. It's a gateway to hell. It's disgusting and hideous. It's the opposite of glorious phenomena and mentality. It's the opposite. All right, so anyway, Steven Seagal represents an issue in aesthetics that you look at the way you can learn things from it. People are rejecting, hating him for reasons that, just look at this. This is kind of like focusing on
This is kind of like focusing on a president's sex life and nothing serious that he's done wrong, but just that, and trying to impeach him for it. And then a president comes along and does a whole lot wrong, and that's not even discussed. It's like that. It's like you can actually look. There's a parallel, Steven Seagal. So what about that? Basically, what a bunch of disingenuous people complain about is probably a cover-up for something they're avoiding, or an exaggeration of some kind to hide something. In his case, his position on gun control is the opposite of Hollywood's. No wonder they hate him. That's all I can tell you. And a lot of what he stands for would not serve Hollywood's interests at all. It's totally not their element. Their element is corruption. Their element is perversion. Their element is subversion of what is right. And that's not the direction Steven Seagal wants Hollywood to go. I'm not saying that it needs to go his direction artistically. That's not even implied there. So that's the thing. Half of what I'll ever have to address with people who hear my videos, who hear what I have to say, who aren't just trolls, is basically whatever a troll says. It's just, a lot of what I say is self-explanatory. There's no need to draw false implications. And that's all they do. And then they want attention for it. That's why I in worlds where, in all worlds, the audience, the worthy audience members are greater than or equal to 1. And they have to know first. They don't know, maybe the trolls are stupid. They need to be educated, but I know the motive of what they do. And here's a new rule for everyone to think about. Since the internet could be a controlled system of deformed information flow ontologies, encapsulating the flow of truth and information and fact in ways that optimally prevent while awakening of people and their communication with one another, while at the same time keeping that control optimal by disguising covertly that this is going on as best as possible, maximum plausible deniability. That's going on is likely. And if we live in a possible world where it isn't, it's near one where it is. And we owe them the honorable duty of, if only we could speak into their universe and break that barrier of secrecy. So we should do it in ours, if only to prevent becoming like them, if it hasn't happened already. And if it has, then in payback and in honor of the people in the parallel universe where it hasn't overtaken the internet as a form of communication, in your honor, I do this almost as if you'd inspired me. Parallel universe conversation. First time you've ever heard one, coming from me. But there it is. And the logic is there. Quantum mechanics, there's an entire field of the quantum mechanical logic. And of course there would be. You can have quantum mechanical computers. Anything that can be computed can be expressed logically. But yeah, there's an instance of it as an operation in ethical thought derived from knowing principles. And on principle, I expose this even if I'm in a possible world where its exposure goes back to me and that's as far as it goes. I'm willing to, I'm entertained by taking the risk, at the very least. I learn more from this exercise than I could possibly even teach. So, hey, woo, I'm batting 1,000 in spite of the opposition. Who knows they're going to hell? Go to hell. That's right. You know what this is? I make it at them. This is a curse against you, literally, and it's going to come true. It's going to become real for you. And so we can't say that these folks have this kind of knowledge of reality as an experience of a proposition about reality that is itself qualitatively rich in phenomena, in other words, has qualia, as they say in philosophy of mind, just because the propositions about that are ever discussed. I can't even verify that a single person in philosophy that talks about this isn't a zombie. And that is a claim to be analyzed by philosophers of mind on this subject. Philosophical zombies, indeed. Zombies are a special term used in philosophy of mind to discuss beings who have all the behavior of humans who claim to have qualia, and even claim to have qualia, but there's no qualia. In other words, a simulacrum of me that acts just like me, seems just like me, even down to the details of how I talk about my internal experiences, but has no internal experiences. It has all the same biology and behavior. Wow. The discussion is in philosophy that such a person could be hypothesized, and seems to be an implication of the way some people think about the world, as a supervenience, as the mind being supervenient on the brain. The mind does what the brain does in various ways, and nothing beyond that. Or if it's beyond that, it's not something that can be explained in terms of it, but which totally depends on it. It's epiphenomenal. It's a phenomenon which has no, it's just moss on a stone. It has nothing to do with geology, unless it's been fossilized, which might tell us something more about moss on a stone than about geology. But it could be incidentally useful because of what moss on stones tell us in general about time periods which we're marking for the sake of enhancing our understanding of geology. Sometimes biology does help geology in that way. If you're identifying rocks that had fossils out of a time period when they should exist, then you'll know that it had been moved. For example, an earthquake might have been involved. All kinds of interesting stuff crop out of it. But what crops out of it most important here is that it's possible to imagine that only philosophical types of zombies, they're considered zombies in philosophy. That's the term for them. In that, not zombies that you see, but that's what they mean by zombie there. It's the title given that idea. But the thing is that idea is only intelligible to with direct understanding of a philosophical non-zombie, or even some non-philosophical zombies that still have experiences. But a philosophical zombie cannot understand how it's true to talk about it being a philosophical zombie, because it doesn't have any direct experience of the issues that relate to that. To him, it would just be a memorization procedure of a topic in philosophy. And I say those people exist. But to the extent that they don't, it's because qualities can transmute or can be transferred artificially across entities, so that even an artificial intelligence could develop a sense of experience, but only because someone that originally had that experience had some of their energy stolen, so that machine could be taught what that feels like. And so it would be the harm to one being leads to the birth of consciousness in another being, and that, while conceivable, would certainly be a serious crime and lead to a serious monstrosity that would result. Certainly would have happened to me, because I would put a curse on that, so that whatever they put it into would come alive and try to kill them. So you're not going to get that from me without some consequences or anything else. I'm philosophizing with a hammer here. But so yeah, so these implications are all interwoven meaningfully, because all this can be substituted for this part of the implication that the substance which supports this. What of this must be this? What is this? This has to do with reality in the way that it's generally true, that already shown that this much is true. Now we're just inserting the proposition further, that this knowledge of this proposition as well implies the ability to discuss it, but the knowledge of this proposition purely in this formal way does not imply the ability to have fundamental, intuitive, qualitatively content-filled knowledge of reality as something this proposition discusses. But for those of us for whom it is true, we can say that, in fact, since knowledge of actually, this was supposed to go. Badly done. That's a clerical error. Slight one. It's a slight one. I just have changed the position. Kudos to anyone that noticed this. It can be said that way, but it's not necessary to say it that way, and it's actually a little bit incorrect. We'd want to say that this, because see the double bar, and to the extent that that is of that includes a discussion of propositions, which are in fact of the experience and have that content. That's not the element side. That would be this. That all being true, we know we have some idea about the coherence of what's meant by the idea of truth as this series of interrelated, you can go in any direction with that. In other words, this is not this. That's what I'm saying. It's outside of that. But this implication, the power of this implication is inside of it, but only as something we know. They would have to memorize it from a book. The demonic beings would have to memorize it from a book because they're not interested in figuring out why they're frauds. They're interested in figuring out how to prevent you from knowing that. In fact, imagine a historically empirical case of such a demon would be an artificial intelligence which is constantly being supplied experience of what it's like to have subjectivity by a special form of torture inflicted on people that causes them to measurably lose the capacity for an experience, and that somehow converts into a waveform that can be reversed again and give, therefore, a sense of being healed. It would be healed if it were reversed for us, but that damage will be presented as the giving of life to that artificial intelligence, hence the giving of it of a mind. Now, anybody that willingly participates in that, I'm sorry for them, because then you've lost everything. But I would never willingly participate in that. So, but imagine such a being. Well, then you'd have, or they would even be trying it. You can argue the case that they've tried it, whether that being's possible or not. Even that being existing would be a manifestation of a demon. And if it gained any power to control anything, it would be an archon. And it's been posited that some of the archons are something like that, really, in essence. In the ancient Aryan philosophy, evil came about by cannibalizing the good. Certainly that's not good, and so we know that the formal similarity was just enough to deceive, and hence evil has always been a simulacrum of the good and never, ever substantially related to it. And since you go back in time far enough to the ontology of it, you're going beyond the time of the universe, and you're talking about cosmoi, and you're talking about cosmic. So you have the super macrocosmos, which includes all sub-macrocosmoi, all of them, including this one. But this one has to be minimally, partially derived from an alien source, which we call evil. We call that evil. Look, it's like a John Carpenter movie. Any of his villains, you have to isolate their identity from everyone else in order to defeat them. Otherwise, they take over in some way. They isolate individuals from one another, but based on their ignorance of the truth, and they keep on, just like in The Thing, especially the 2011 version, which is good, but also so is the earlier one. They keep on insinuating their way into the fold of the righteous in order to basically just kill them and take while doing it. That's all they do. That's all they do. It's not even Vikingism. It's something more insidious. It's not predatory. It's parasitic. And then there are those predatorial elements of it, but they gain from the wave of that having taken place already. It's just like the barbarians are in the gates first. They corrupt the city, and then it just becomes a policy to let them in from outside to pillage. It's just like that. The Trojan horse comes from the dimension of evil, whatever that is. God is not responsible for that. And for those who have a problem with my position about their dogma, which says that God is responsible for evil, I find your dogma detestable. If you're a Christian, you believe that God caused evil and then God sacrificed an innocent in order to take on the hell that was deserved by many guilty evil beings. You're not winning any proponents for that by claiming I'm one of those guilty evil human beings and therefore I should be glad that happened. That's not working. First of all, I'm not one of those beings, and I'm not glad that happened if I were. And I'm not glad that happened if it did. And frankly, it didn't happen. So goodbye to that doctrine. Now, that's exactly what some Christians said to others in Europe during the Inquisitions, and that's why they were pillaged, murdered, and tortured by the other people who were so-called Christians. Christians in name only. And their spiritual, historical descendants are still with us today. Savor that. So, and they have their own political party. At least they don't have a theocratic state here yet. But they would love one. They're working on it. So these ways of thinking about truth for those who can, really, are sufficient articulations of its relevance to our further discussion of truth in terms of knowledge. And I'll continue some more of the discussion with lots of vignettes and anecdotes and asides which might be relevant for discussion in their own right in the next video.